So what happens to the stock market after the Fed makes that first rate cut? Welcome to another episode of Millstone River Live, a podcast brought to you by Millstone River Wealth Management. Hello, Adam.
Hey, Matt.
So, everybody's talking about the Federal Reserve and interest rate cuts, and I'm not so sure that everybody who's talking about it really knows enough about it. So I was thinking maybe today I could ask you a few questions and you can enlighten us.
I'll do my best.
Sounds good. So let's get started. The Federal Reserve is in the news a lot, but I'm not sure everybody really understands what it is that they do. How about we start right there?
Sure. So, where are we? The Fed last raised interest rates between 5.25% and 5.5% in July of 2023, and since has been on hold. Keeping our economy healthy is at the core of the Fed's responsibilities. Some like to say that they have a dual mandate, which focuses both on price stability and maximum employment. So price stability focuses on ensuring inflation remains low and stable. And maximum employment helps the economy grow by keeping as many people employed as possible.
So if they've been on hold since last summer, then the effect has been to do what?
Well, they've held interest rates higher as it aimed to slow the U.S. economy and curb inflation through higher borrowing costs. Progress has been made on the dual mandate. Inflation has fallen, but the economy has also cooled as the number of jobs created is falling, and the employment rate ticked to 4.3%, which is still low for traditional measures.
So I think that uptick in unemployment made a lot of people kind of nervous about what does that really mean, and maybe more importantly, what does that mean is coming next?
Exactly. I think that was maybe one of the reasons the uptick in unemployment that sent markets sharply lower in early August as recession concerns resurfaced. The fear is that the Fed is too late in cutting interest rates. The markets are now pricing interest rates cuts starting as early as the next meeting in September. With recession fears looming again, the Fed's pivot to rate cuts, we think that if that we provide some context, we can see, though, how does that relate to the stock market once they finally start lowering rates?
All right, so we got a little bit of a better sense about what's actually going on and why they're trying to do it. But I think the underlying question that most investors have is, what happens to stocks after they do make that rate cut that you're talking about?
Yeah, and it's a great question. So we did some research with the help of FactSet, and since 1970, there's been 19 instances of rate cuts. In 11 of 19, the economy experienced a recession within a year of the first rate cut. The Fed has not had a good track record of cutting rates early enough to avoid a recession, sometimes called a soft landing. However, this has not necessarily spelled doom for markets either. Most of the time, stocks were up 1 year later. The double-digit declines in the first year coincided with the inflation spiral in the 1970s and 80s as Paul Volcker tried to tame inflation. Also, the bursting of the dot-com bubble in 2000 and then the great financial crisis of 2008. As we span out 3 years after the first rate cuts, the number of instances of negative returns declines, and it's never been down 5 years after the initial rate cut.
So it should come as no surprise that stocks did better when the recession was avoided.
Exactly. And even in a situation in which a recession did occur, I think most people would be surprised that the performance was actually better than most would anticipate, even in a recession.
Okay, that makes sense. So put on your white lab coat and pretend that you're a doctor and you've come in to examine our economy as it is today, and we're recording this episode in August of 2024. What would be your diagnosis?
Well, I don't have much of a medical experience, but I think there is a good analogy that I've heard, and you might say that we're pre-diabetic or pre-something or other. Basically, in this state, you have to adjust your diet and increase your exercise to avoid the dreaded disease. And your current state, though, is not necessarily your final fate. Similarly, that's where the Fed is right now. It needs to cut rates to reduce borrowing costs and curb the slowing job market to avoid a recession.
So there are skeptics out there about whether the Fed can do this properly or not. And there is a question that comes up during client conversations that I've heard, and I know you've heard, which is about this term that gets batted around, soft landing. What do we think?
Well, I think anyone that tells you with certainty they know that the Fed is going to be able to organize a soft landing or not is probably not being truthful with you, because it's a very, very challenging thing to predict. However, even for those skeptics who doubt whether the Fed can engineer a soft landing, i.e. avoiding a recession while keeping inflation in check, history shows that stocks have fared reasonably well post rate cuts in both scenarios. After a period of unusually calm markets, investors should prepare for greater volatility and remain focused on the bigger picture before making any drastic changes to one's financial plan or portfolio. After all, the Fed only cuts rates to stave off that pre-illness.
That sounds good. So what do we want people to walk away with from this conversation? I guess 3 things. First, a slowing job market resurrected the recession fears here over the last several weeks, and that kind of set the path for interest rate cuts maybe sooner than later. I say maybe because we never really know until we know. And as Yogi Berra said, it ain't over till the fat lady sings. The fat lady's name is Jerome Powell, and we're just waiting for him to sing. History tells us that stocks have done well despite a poor track record from the Fed historically at avoiding recession. And after unusually calm markets, investors should prepare for a little bit of a bumpier ride, as the Fed often cuts rates at precarious times in our economy. We hope that this quick discussion about interest rate cuts and the impact on markets was helpful. If it was, and you think someone else might benefit, we encourage you to share this episode with that person. And we hope that you've enjoyed listening to this episode of Millstone River Live. We look forward to catching up with you on the next one.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Millstone River Live. Feel free to share it with someone you think might benefit. Millstone River Wealth Management is an independent wealth management firm based in New Jersey. We form a supportive partnership with our clients and help with financial education and planning. We welcome your feedback. Send comments or questions to podcast@millstone-river.com. More information about our firm can be found online at millstone-river.com. Thanks for listening.